The town of Willowbrook had always whispered secrets, its cobblestone streets winding like veins through a heart frozen in time, a relic of an era when love letters were penned by candlelight and promises were etched into bark with pocket knives, a place where every brick seemed to hum with the weight of unspoken stories, and none more potent than the legend of Clara. The ghost said to wander the shadows of the ancient oak tree at the edge of the town square, her presence a spectral balm for fractured hearts, her story lost to history but resurrected in fragments by generations of gossips and romantics, a tale of a young widow who drowned herself in the river after her husband vanished in the Civil War, only to return, they said, when two souls torn apart by fate trembled on the precipice of reunion, a myth dismissed as quaint folklore until the autumn of 2023. When a storm of biblical ferocity tore through Willowbrook, its winds howling like a chorus of restless spirits, its rains slicing through the earth with vengeful precision, unearthing a rusted locket tangled in the gnarled roots of that very oak, its chain corroded but its heart-shaped pendant still gleaming faintly, as if the metal itself had clung to the memory of warmth, the initials L and E carved clumsily on the back, a relic buried decades ago by a teenage Liam Carter, his hands shaking as he kissed Evelyn Moore beneath those same branches. Their laughter echoing through the dusk as they vowed forever. No matter what, a promise as fragile as the autumn leaves that rained down around them, little knowing that life, with its sharp edges and unplanned detours, would stretch those words thin as smoke, that the locket would one day resurface not as a relic of innocence but as a key to a labyrinth of buried truths, its discovery setting off a chain reaction that would unravel the carefully constructed lies of two families, expose the rot festering beneath Willowbrook's postcard-perfect facade, and force Liam and Evelyn to confront the ghosts they'd spent half their lives outrunning, the storm itself seeming to wail with Clara's voice, as if the sky were tearing open to demand justice for every love story the town had swallowed whole. Liam, now a reclusive architect in New York, had spent the last 15 years building skyscrapers that pierced the heavens, their glass facades reflecting a city that never slept, a stark contrast to the quiet ache he carried in his ribcage, a hollow space where Willowbrook and Evelyn once resided, his days a meticulous mosaic of meetings and blueprints, his nights a silent tug-of-war between pride and regret. For he had become a man who designed homes for others but slept in a loft that felt more like a museum of his own avoidance, the ghost of that last voicemail from Evelyn still haunting him, a message left on a rainy October night, her voice fraying at the edges as she said, "I'm sorry, Liam, it's not just the accident, there's something I couldn't tell you, something I'm still trying to understand. Please don't hate me," the line going dead before he could respond, before he could demand answers. Before he could tell her had always wait, but pride had stiffened his spine, and had buried the memory like the locket beneath the oak, until the sound of her voice became a ritual, played in the dark hours when the city's glow couldn't reach him, his finger hovering over the call button, always retreating, always wondering if forever had expired, if time had sanded down their bond to nothing but a faint scar, until the day his assistant slid a tabloid across his desk. The headline screaming about a cursed locket unearthed in hometown of disgraced architect's teenage flame. His blood turning to ice as he recognized the initials, the tree, the dizzying rush of memories, Evelyn's hair smelling of wild mint as they slow danced at the senior prom, her tears hot on his collarbone the night her sister died, the way Shed flinched when he touched her wrist after the fire, as if his hands were made of ash. The voicemail had replayed until the words blurred into a funeral dirge, and now here it was, the locket, dangling from the screen of his laptop in a viral tweet, its rusted chain a noose around his throat, the comments section a carnival of speculation. Whoozy ghost bride vibes this town's giving him. Night Shyamalan until had slammed the laptop shut, his breath ragged, his reflection in the window a stranger's face, gaunt and haunted, as New York's skyline blurred into Willowbrook's shadow. Evelyn, meanwhile, had forged herself into a lioness of London's journalism scene, her byline a blade that slit open corruption and lies, her reputation built on a ruthless pursuit of truth, though the greatest lie Shed ever told was to herself, that Shed moved on, that the past was a locked room Shed thrown away the key to. But late at night, when the hum of the city faded, Shed traced the scar on her wrist. A relic of the fire that had devoured her childhood home, her sister's laughter silenced. In the ashes, her father's rage a poison that seeped into every corner of their lives, until the night Shed fled Willowbrook with nothing but a backpack and a shattered heart. Her mother's final words, gasped on a hospice bed 2 years prior, still ringing in her ears like a curse. The fire, it wasn't your fault, Evie. But there were things your father made me hide, secrets that God, I'm so sorry, the confession cutting deeper than any headline. Leaving Evelyn to wonder if every truth Shed ever chased was just a shadow of the one Shed been running from. Her therapist's voice a gentle but unrelenting echo. You can't interview your way out of grief, Evelyn. Yet Shed tried, burying herself in work, in a charming but hollow relationship with a British novelist who loved her like a subplot, not a protagonist, until the day her editor slid a newspaper across her desk, the headline blaring. Small town's ghostly love token goes viral, a photo of the locket making her coffee slosh over the rim, her pulse a frantic drumbeat as she read the inscription to E my forever. The letters swimming as London's rain streaked the office windows. Her mind catapulted back to the oak tree, to Liam's hands, rough from football practice, fumbling with the clasp as he muttered, "It's cheaper than the ones in the movies. But, it's us, right?" The memory so vivid she could taste the cinnamon gum Head chewed that day, could feel the way his heartbeat had thudded against her palm when she pressed it to his chest. Could hear her own voice, young and reckless, "Forever so long time, Carter." And his reply, "Not long enough," now reduced to a clickbait spectacle. Her editor's voice slicing through the fog. "You're from there, yeah, go milk this ghost story for clicks." The assignment a grenade tossed into the vault of her past, her flight to Willowbrook booked under a pseudonym, her chest tight as the plane descended, the oak tree looming like a judge and jury, its branches clawing at the sky as if to ask. Ready to stop running, her fists clenched, her therapist's warning a distant hum, reopening. "Wounds can be curative or catastrophic, Evelyn. You'll only know which once you're bleeding." When the locket surfaced, it sparked a media frenzy, TikTok videos dissecting its romantic symbolism, historians debating its origins, and true crime podcasts spinning wild theories about Clara's ghost orchestrating a real-life love story. The town's eccentric historian, Margot, leaning into the chaos with the flair of a carnival ringmaster, her silver hair piled into a messy bun, her fingers stained with ink and gin, her voice a gravelly melody, as she regaled reporters with tales of Willowbrook's star-crossed lovers. "Clara doesn't haunt dearie, she curates," Shed wink, though her amusement turned razor-sharp when the mayor proposed auctioning the locket, Margot's handwritten letter to Liam Carter slipping into the mail with ominous precision. "Your tree is weeping, boy. Time to come home." While across the Atlantic, Evelyn's editor, a man allergic to subtlety, smirked and said, "You're from there, yeah, go milk this ghost story for clicks," unaware had just handed her a shovel to exhume the grave Shed's sworn to leave sealed. Her flight to Willowbrook booked under a pseudonym, her chest tight as the plane descended, the oak tree looming like a judge and jury, its branches clawing at the sky as if to ask. Ready to stop running, Margot, meanwhile, had already set the stage. The town's archives meticulously rearranged to ensure Liam and Evelyn would collide in the musty backroom where Clara's letters mouldered in a cedar chest, the historian's motives murkier than the river where the widow had drowned, her own family's ledger speckled with sins Shed spent decades repainting as folklore. Her great-great-grandfather the sheriff had covered up the lynching of Clara's husband. A truth buried in census records and land deeds, now threatening to surface alongside the locket. Margot's gin-soaked laughter echoing through her creaky Victorian as she whispered to the portrait of Clara above her fireplace, "Give them hell, darling. They'll thank you later," the ghost-painted eyes seeming to flicker in the firelight as Willowbrook braced for the storm of reunion. The air thick with the scent of damp earth and unfinished business, the locket's rusted chain a fuse burning down to the powder keg of the past. Margot's raspy voice would later recount how the ghost, a 19th-century widow named Clara, had reportedly been seen the night the locket was found, her silhouette flickering near the oak tree, a sign, Margot insisted, that the universe was stitching torn seams, though Liam scoffed, until he arrived in Willowbrook and collided with Evelyn in the dim light of the town's dusty archive, a collision that sent papers cascading like autumn leaves, their hands brushing as they scrambled to gather fragments of the past, the air between them crackling with the static of unsaid things. Margot's laughter echoing from the doorway as she muttered, "Right on schedule," her presence as calculated as the yellowed maps pinned to the walls, her own history woven into Willowbrook's tapestry like a thorn vine, for Margot had been the keeper of secrets since her youth, her grandmother regaling her with stories of Clara's despair, of how the widow's ghost had once guided Margot's own mother back to a lover-shed thought. Lost to the Korean War, a reunion that ended in a double suicide pact, their bodies found clutching a locket identical to Liam and Evelyn's, a fact Margot had scrubbed from town records but etched into her bones, her lives' work now a penance for generations of meddling, her gin-breath confession to Clara's portrait the night before Liam arrived, this time, let's get it right. And no more blood on the oak, her motives a cocktail of guilt and hope as she orchestrated the accidental meeting, the archives. Single flickering bulb casting Liam and Evelyn's shadows on a filing cabinet labeled Carter Moore Feud 1932-1987, Evelyn's voice sharp as she snapped, "You kept the locket." Liam's retort a defensive growl, "You kept running," their words clashing like swords until Margot slammed a ledger on the table, its pages detailing the fire inspector's bribes, her tone theatrical. "Save the foreplay for after we dig up the bodies, darlings," the ledger opening to a photo of Evelyn's father and Liam's uncle shaking hands. Over a briefcase of cash, the date stamped 2 days after the fire, a revelation that turned Evelyn's face to ash, her whisper a blade, "They paid to let my sister die." Liam's hand hovering near her shoulder, retreating as Margot purred, "The apple doesn't fall far, does it? But who's the orchard? And who's the rot?" Her riddles a smoke screen for her own complicity, her great-aunt having been the fire inspector's mistress. The truth a matryoshka doll of betrayal. Their first words in 15 years were a stumble of awkward apologies and stifled laughter, the tension thawed momentarily by the absurdity of Margot's insistence they share a room at the town's only inn, for research purposes, though the real reason lay in Margot's cryptic journal entry, "Clara's ghost only guides those who confront the shadows they've fled," the inn itself a creaking monument to lost loves. Its wallpaper peeling like the layers of Liam and Evelyn's defenses, the room assigned to them the widow's suite draped in moth-eaten velvet and the scent of dried roses, a four-poster bed looming like an accusation, Evelyn's suitcase snapping open with a sound like a gunshot, her nervous joke, "If there's a secret passage, I call dibs on escaping first," falling flat as Liam tossed his keys on the dresser, the clatter echoing their teenage fight in this very room after prom, his voice tight. "We've slept in worse places," the double entendre hanging like mist, both remembering the night they'd camped by the river, zipped into a single sleeping bag, her head on his chest as he vowed, "I'll build you a house with 1,000 windows," a promise now a shard in their throats, the silence ruptured by Margot pounding on the door, "Dinner's in 10, and where something flammable. Clara likes a show," the meal a surreal pantomime in the inn's dining room, its walls lined with portraits of dead couples, Margot toasting to exhumed secrets and ex-lovers. "May they both fuck us gently," her grin sharp as a scalpel as she slid a key across the table, attics unlocked. "You'll want the box labeled More Carter Star Cross Deluxe," the attic stairs groaning under their weight, the air thick with the ghosts of Margot's ancestors, the box disgorging love letters between Evelyn's grandmother and Liam's grandfather, their prose dripping with desperation, "Meet me at the Oak, or I'll burn this town to find you," and a newspaper clipping detailing the grandfather's disappearance in 1946. His car found idling near the river, a note on the seat, "Clara's waiting." Evelyn's knees buckling as Liam gripped her elbow, his breath hot on her neck, "This is bigger than us," her reply a tremor, "or we're just the latest suckers in their curse loop," the moment shattered by a crash downstairs, Margot yelling, "That'd be the ghost. $10 says she's photobombing your U-Haul plans." As Liam and Evelyn pored over documents, they uncovered clues hinting at Clara's own tragic second chance, a love letter hidden in a church pew, signed by a man whose name history had erased, the parallels to their own story unnerving Evelyn, who joked, "If I start seeing floating candlesticks, I'm booking the next flight to London," her humor masking the tremor in her hands. The letter's ink faded but its plea legible, "My dearest Clara, forgive the lies they told you. I live, but bound by chains not of my making. Wait for me at the river's bend." The rest devoured by mold, the mystery gnawing at them as they traced the author's identity to a Union soldier reported dead at Antietam, his survival buried by a town elder who'd coveted Clara's land, the soldier's fate a mirror of Evelyn's sister's death, truth smothered by greed, the documents revealing that Clara's husband had been imprisoned in a root cellar for years. His whispers to her through an air vent dismissed as madness until he starved, his bones discovered decades later by a boy digging for treasure, a trauma that drove Clara to the river, her ghost a manifestation of every love story Willowbrook had throttled, the weight of this history pressing Liam and Evelyn into opposite corners of the archive, Evelyn's voice breaking, "We're just ghosts repeating the same damn story," Liam's retort fierce, "Then let's change the ending." Their argument interrupted by Margot tossing a diary onto the table, its pages open to an entry dated the night of the fire, Evelyn's mother's handwriting screaming from the margins, "He knows about the baby. Hell, kill Liam if he finds out. God help us," the words yanking the oxygen from the room, Evelyn's scream a silent thing, her fist crumpling the page as Liam staggered back, "Baby," the question a detonation, Margot's exit stage with a slam of the door, her voice trailing, "Don't forget to tip your trauma guide." The next morning, a power outage stranded them in the archive, the glow of their phones illuminating whispers of what-ifs. Liam confessing head kept her old mixtape, track 4 still guts me, his voice cracking as he mimed their opening chords of Landslide, the memory of Evelyn singing it off-key in his pickup truck flooding back, her boots propped on the dash, the world outside a blur of cornfields and possibility, the tape itself tucked in a shoebox beneath his bed in New York, its casing cracked from the night had thrown it against the wall after her disappearance, only to crawl on hands and knees at 3 a.m. to salvage it. The fragility of that moment now mirrored in the archive's dim light, Evelyn admitting she'd named her cat Joni after Mitchell, "because you ruined Blue for anyone else," her attempt at levity crumbling as she confessed, "I tried to replace you, Liam. With cities, with bylines, with men who didn't know how I took my coffee, but they all felt like cover bands, the air thickening with words unspoken, their faces lit by the cold light of screens, the conversation spiraling into the night they'd conceived the child Evelyn lost." Liam's voice raw, "You didn't think I'd want to know," his hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only anchor in a storm. Evelyn's tears glittering in the blue glow, "You didn't fight for me when I left," her accusation a blade honed over years of replaying his silence, his roar shaking dust from the rafters, "You didn't let me," the truth of it a grenade pin pulled, the room vibrating with the aftershocks of their pain, a living thing thrashing between them until Evelyn whispered, "I heard you called my name when the firemen pulled me out," her fingers brushing the scar on her wrist, "They had to sedate you. You were wild. Like you tear the hospital down." Liam's confession softer. The investigation took a sharp turn when they discovered a 1940s photograph of Evelyn's grandmother standing beside Liam's grandfather, their hands clasped, a diary entry revealing a forbidden affair. "Well, find each other again, in another life," the ink blurred by tears or time, the photograph's edges singed, as if pulled from the same fire that had devoured Evelyn's childhood home, the diary's author Evelyn's grandmother, Genevieve, detailing clandestine meetings under the oak tree, letters smuggled in hollowed-out books, and a pregnancy lost to a back-alley procedure, the parallels to Liam and Evelyn's own story unnerving, Evelyn's voice a frayed wire, history's a damn plagiarist, her attempt to laugh strangled by the weight of generational grief, the diary's final entry dated the day Genevieve's lover vanished, "They say he drowned, but I hear his voice in the walls. Clara's ghost watches me. She knows I'll join him soon," the words a cold finger down Evelyn's spine, Liam's hands trembling as he unfolded a land deed showing his grandfather's property seized by the town after his disappearance, the mayor at the time Margot's great-uncle signing the order with a flourish. "So they stole his land, buried his name, and called it Progress," his voice thick with disgust, Evelyn's nails biting into her palms. "And my grandmother died in a suicide everyone called inevitable. How many bodies does this town need?" The question hanging like a noose until Margot materialized in the doorway, her grin sharp, "As many as it takes to keep the tourists coming, darling. Now put on your boots, we're digging up Clara's time capsule." The moonlit trek to the riverbank fraught with the rustle of unseen things, Clara's name whispered by the reeds, the time capsule a rusted ammunition box buried beneath a cairn of stones, its contents a wedding ring, a lock of hair, and a confession in Clara's spidery script, "I did not drown." He is alive. They have him. Find him, please. With the aftershocks of their pain, a living thing thrashing between them until Evelyn whispered, I heard you called my name when the firemen pulled me out. Her fingers brushing the scar on her wrist, they had to sedate you. You were wild. Like you tear the hospital down. Liam's confession softer. I punched your dad when he tried to stop me from seeing you. The memory of his split knuckles, her father's blood on the hospital floor, the unspoken alliance they'd forged in silence. The outage ending as abruptly as it began, lights blazing on to reveal them forehead, breaths mingling. The charged moment shattered by Margot's cackle over the intercom. Get a room, oh wait, their laughter a fragile bridge, the truce sealed by Liam. Murmuring, track 12. What was it? Evelyn's smile bittersweet. A song I wrote. About us. I burned it, his finger brushing hers. Liar. Her gaze dropping. It's in a vault in London. A relic, the admission a thread pulled, unraveling the distance between them until Margot's voice crackled again. Wrap up the sexual tension and get to the cemetery. Clara's got a matinee show. The night's shadows stretching like fingers toward the unmarked grave they'd yet to find. The archives clock ticking louder, each second a hammer strike on the coffin of their denial. The investigation took a sharp turn when they discovered a 1940s photograph of Evelyn's grandmother standing beside Liam's grandfather, their hands clasped, a diary entry revealing a forbidden affair. We'll find each other again, in another life. The ink blurred by tears or time, the photograph's edges singed, as if pulled from the same fire that had devoured Evelyn's childhood home. The diary's author, Evelyn's grandmother. Genevieve, detailing clandestine meetings under the oak tree, letters smuggled in hollowed-out books, and a pregnancy lost to a back-alley procedure. The parallels to Liam and Evelyn's own story unnerving. Evelyn's voice a frayed wire. History's a damn plagiarist. Her attempt to laugh strangled by the weight of generational grief. The diary's final entry dated the day Genevieve's lover vanished. They say he drowned, but I hear his voice in the walls. Clara's ghost watches me. She knows I'll join him soon. The words a cold finger down Evelyn's spine, Liam's hands trembling as he unfolded a land deed showing his grandfather's property seized by the town after his disappearance. The mayor at the time, Margot's great-uncle, signing the order with a flourish. So they stole his land, buried his name, and called it progress, his voice thick with disgust, Evelyn's nails biting into her palms. And my grandmother died in a suicide everyone called inevitable. How many bodies does this town need? The question hanging like a noose until Margot materialized in the doorway, her grin sharp. As many as it takes to keep the tourists coming, darling. Now, put on your boots, we're digging up Clara's time capsule. The moonlit trek to the riverbank fraught with the rustle of unseen things, Clara's name whispered by the reeds. The time capsule, a rusted ammunition box buried beneath a cairn of stones, its contents a wedding ring, a lock of hair, and a confession in Clara's spidery script: I did not drown. He is alive. They have him. Find him. Please. Margot vanished the next morning, leaving a note. The ghost's final test: find the truth behind the fire, thrusting them into the wreckage of Evelyn's childhood home, the foundation choked with weeds and the ghosts of what-ifs, Liam's flashlight beam catching the glint of a charred box beneath a collapsed beam, its hinges fused shut, Evelyn's hands shaking as she pried it open with a crowbar, the screech of metal echoing like a scream. The box disgorging letters from Liam's father to Evelyn's mother, pleading for forgiveness. I shouldn't have covered for my brother, the faulty wiring. God, forgive me. The dates spanning a decade, each letter more desperate than the last, Evelyn's voice a hollow echo. They knew. All those years, they knew it wasn't me. Her knees buckling as Liam gripped her arm. Your father knew it was his brother's fault. My uncle, he paid off the inspector to protect the family name. Their shared grief a bridge across time, the wind carrying the scent of burnt wood and lilacs, Evelyn's sister's favorite flower. The air suddenly colder, Clara's silhouette flickering at the edge of the ruins, her hand outstretched toward the river. Liam's voice breaking, she's here. She's been here the whole time. Evelyn's tears hot and furious. What do you want from us? The ghost's silence, an answer as deafening as the past, until a glint in the ashes caught Evelyn's eye. Her sister's charm bracelet, its tiny piano charm still intact, the discovery a gut punch, her wails splitting the night. She was alive, and there they let her burn, Liam's arms wrapping around her as she thrashed. I could have saved her, his own tears mingling with hers. You were a kid, Evie. We were all just kids, the moment etched into the ruins, Clara's ghost fading as if satisfied, the first rays of dawn staining the sky the color of a healing bruise. Evelyn's knees buckled. All these years, I thought I'd left the stove on, that I'd killed my sister, her voice splintering as she clutched the charm bracelet, the piano charm digging into her palm, each note her sister had played rushing back for release on a out-of-tune upright. The soundtrack to their childhood, now a funeral march. Liam gripping her arm. Your father knew it was his brother's fault. My uncle, he paid off the inspector to protect the family name, his words a scalpel cutting through the lie she'd swallowed whole. Evelyn's rage a wildfire, and your father helped bury it. Your family. Mine. This whole damn town, her fist connecting with the charred wall, the pain a fleeting distraction from the hull building in her chest, Liam's confession a whisper. After you left, my dad drank himself to death. Guilt, maybe? Or cowardice, the admission a thread connecting their family's rot. Evelyn's laugh jagged. So we're both orphans of their fucking secrets. Her hand finding his, the gesture involuntary, electric, the ruins around them a cathedral of ash and reckoning, Clara's ghost reappearing at the tree line, her finger pointing toward the river, Liam's resolve hardening. We finish this. For her. For us, the trek to the water's edge silent but for the crunch of dead leaves underfoot, the river's surface oily in the moonlight, Clara's reflection shimmering beside their own, Evelyn's voice steady now, she's leading us to him. To her husband, the mud sucking at their boots as they waded into the shallows, Liam's flashlight beam catching the glint of metal submerged in the silt, his dive into the icy water reckless, resurfacing with a rusted rifle and a Union soldier's dog tags, the name Benjamin H. Clark stamped into the metal, Clara's maiden name clicking into place, Evelyn's gasp audible. They didn't just erase him. They drowned him, the dog tags clutched in her fist, Clara's ghost dissolving into mist above the water, her whisper carried on the wind. Thank you. As they pieced together the truth, Clara's ghost became a silent third wheel, sightings reported by townsfolk, a shadow in Evelyn's periphery, a cold breeze Liam felt when Evelyn laughed, their skepticism eroding like the cliffs near Willowbrook, until they stood at Clara's grave, the dates revealing she'd died exactly 150 years to the day before their reunion, the headstone weather-worn but legible. Clara and Clark. Beloved wife. Taken too soon. The lie etched in stone a final insult, Evelyn's finger tracing the false dates. She didn't drown. She fought. Just like us, her voice fierce with kinship, Liam's hand on the small of her back, will give her the truth. Carve it into the damn town square, their pack sealed by the tolling of the church bell, the sound reverberating through the valley, the festival erupting around them in a garish blur of neon and nostalgia, the townsfolk dancing under paper lanterns strung between lampposts, children shrieking as they chased fireflies, the air thick with the smell of cotton candy and closure, Liam confronting his fiancée back in New York. We need to talk. The words a guillotine drop, her scream piercing his ear. You left me for a ghost. His silence answer enough, Evelyn deleting a draft email to her boyfriend. I can't pretend I'm not still in love with him, the cursor blinking like accusation before she emptied the trash folder, their phones tossed into drawers like grenades with clipped wires, the night crescendoing with fireworks, their explosions painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold. Liam's fingers brushing Evelyn's under the picnic table, her whisper barely audible, what if we're just another tragedy in their scrapbook? His reply a vow, then will be a tragedy with a footnote. They burned the damn scrapbook. A festival erupted in town, celebrating the locket's discovery. But beneath the fireworks, Liam confronted his fiancée back in New York. We need to talk, the words curdling in his throat as he paced the inn's mothball-scented hallway, her voice sharpening from confusion to fury. You left me for a ghost story. Her name Amara suddenly foreign on his tongue, her existence reduced to a footnote in the epic of his unraveling, their engagement a performance he'd mistaken for peace, her Instagram perfect life now a funhouse mirror reflecting his own emptiness. You proposed to me on a Ferris wheel, Liam, she shrieked, the memory of that night in Coney Island now tainted, the diamond ring she'd flaunted to her sorority sisters glinting like a shackle, his reply a monotone. I thought I could want what you wanted. I was wrong, her tears a weapon. You're throwing away years for some backwater fling. His silence a verdict. the call ending with her scream dissolving into dial tone, while across the hall, Evelyn deleted a draft email to her boyfriend. I can't pretend I'm not still in love with him, the cursor blinking like a metronome to her heartbeat, Oliver's face swimming into focus, his Cambridge charm. His habit of calling her darling like a punctuation mark, their relationship a well-curated exhibit of dinner parties and detached affection, his reply to her breakup text instantaneous, still chasing fairy tales, Evie the condescension a match struck in a gas leak, her fingers trembling as she typed, some fairy tales are worth the burn, her phone hurled into the dresser drawer, the screen cracking like the facade she'd worn since London, the festival's cacophony bleeding through the walls, children's laughter, fiddles screeching. Margot's drunken rendition of Jolene, the dissonance a soundtrack to their parallel unmooring, Liam's reflection in the hallway mirror a stranger's face, stubble-shadowed and resolute, Evelyn's cheeks streaked with mascara as she muttered, "Fuck you, Clara," to the empty room, their phones left to smolder in the dark, the festival outside a grotesque parody of the closure they'd yet to earn. Drunk on moonshine and nostalgia, they slow danced at Margot's insistence. The ghost stories around them fading as Liam murmured, "I never listened to track 12, his palm searing through the thin fabric of her dress, the space between their bodies a minefield of memory, the song in question a hidden track on the mixtape she'd slipped into his locker weeks before the fire, now a phantom limb between them. Evelyn's reply a whisper, "Because I never gave it to you, it was a goodbye." The confession unspooling the night she'd recorded it in her bedroom, her father's drunken shouts echoing downstairs. The lyrics scribbled on the back of a gas bill, "If love's a knife, then let me bleed / but don't you dare call it a need," her voice cracking as she sang into a karaoke mic duct taped to a hairbrush, the tape left buried in a jewelry box she'd later thrown into the Thames, a symbolic burial that hadn't stopped the words from haunting her, Liam's breath hitching. "You wrote it," his grip tightening as if she might dissolve, "after the fire, after you stopped returning my calls." Her voice breaking, "I thought if I gave it to you, you'd see how broken I was. How guilty. So I kept it." Like a coward, the admission a key turning in a rusted lock, the dance floor shrinking to the size of a coffin, Margot's voice slicing through the haze, "Save the sob story for the seance." Darlings, her cackle drowned out by the jukebox skipping to unchained melody, Liam's forehead resting against Evelyn's, "Play it for me." Now, his plea a live wire, her resolve crumbling, "It's gone," his lips grazing her temple, "Liar. You're a terrible liar, Evie." Her laugh wet with tears, "Fine. But you'll hate it." The song's ghost rising between them as the room spun, the past and present collapsing into a singularity, Margot's flask clattering to the floor. "Get a damn room, oh wait." The next clue led them to a chapel's attic, where a dusty gramophone played Clara's voice from a wax cylinder, "My dearest, find me in the next life." The recording crackling like a campfire, Clara's accent a lilting blend of appellation and grief, followed by a man's plea, "I'll wait, no matter how long." The voice unmistakably Benjamin's, raw, fervent, a soldier's baritone eroded by hope, Evelyn's tears silent as Liam gripped her hand. "What if we're the next life?" The question hanging like a pendulum, the attic's shadows stretching into the shape of Clara's silhouette, her presence a pressure in the room, the gramophone's needle looping endlessly as Evelyn whispered, "Then we're fucking doomed." Her attempt at levity undercut by the tremble in her fingers, the cylinder's label peeling to reveal a hidden message beneath the oak, "Dig where the roots weep." Margot's handiwork evident in the red wax seal pressed with AC, the descent into the chapel's belly a descent into their own guts, the shovel striking something metallic, the lockbox surfacing like a corpse, its contents a soldier's uniform button, a lock of auburn hair tied with ribbon, and a map of Willowbrook circa 1865. The river's course altered to erase the bend where Benjamin's rifle was found, Liam's voice a growl, "They rewrote the land to bury him." Evelyn's finger tracing the falsified banks, "All this for a lie." The map crumbling at the edges, Clara's whisper threading through the dust motes, "Tell them. Tell them all." The weight of her plea a yoke on their shoulders, the moon rising like a bloated witness as they carried the evidence into town, the festival's remnants tattered streamers, trampled popcorn a mockery of the truth they now wielded. A crisis struck when Liam's fiancée arrived, her fury a tempest. "You left me for a ghost story." Amara's designer heels sinking into the mud as she stormed the inn, her Gucci scarf snagging on a rose bush, her existence a splash of Manhattan spite against Willowbrook's grime. Liam's retort a weary sigh. You left me for a promotion. Remember Tokyo, the temporary CEO, her flinch admission. That was business, her mascara bleeding as Evelyn's boyfriend appeared, his British charm laced with venom. Still chasing fairy tales, Evie Oliver's smirk a knife twist, his tweed blazer smelling of Cambridge libraries and condescension. Evelyn's snarl feral. You proposed because your publisher said settled men sell more books, his mask slipping, and you said yes because you're terrified of being alone. The confrontation erupting in the inn's lobby, Margot cackling from the stairs. Clara does love drama. Her flask raised in salute as Amara lunged at Evelyn. You ruined him, Liam intercepting her. She saved me. Oliver's punch grazing Liam's jaw. You're a cliché. Carter the brawl dissolving into farce. Evelyn's knee connecting with Oliver's groin. And you're a footnote. Her exit staged with a slam of the screen door, the night air stinging her lungs as she fled to the oak tree, Liam finding her there. A heated argument igniting. You left without a word, his roar scattering crows from the branches, Evelyn's scream echoing. You didn't fight for me, their wounds laid bare under the moon's cold eye. Her collapse to the roots a surrender. I was pregnant. Liam, I lost the baby after the fire. The words a detonation, his knees hitting the earth beside her. Why didn't you? I couldn't, she sobbed. I was 15, and you were all I had, and then I was nothing, his arms engulfing her. You were everything, the oak's leaves rustling in agreement, Clara's ghost a silent sentinel as the town slept, unaware of the fault lines splitting beneath it. That night, Evelyn fled to the oak tree, her boots sinking into the rain-softened earth, the moon a cold witness to her unraveling, the confession about the pregnancy clawing its way out of her throat like a creature starved for light. I was pregnant, Liam, I lost the baby after the fire, the words hanging in the air like smoke, his face collapsing in slow motion, the man who'd built skyscrapers reduced to rubble by 4 syllables. Why didn't you? His voice splintering. Why didn't you tell me? Her laughter a serrated thing, tell you, her hands raking through her hair. I was 15, Liam. 15. I woke up in the hospital with 3rd-degree burns and a nurse saying the fetus didn't survive, like she was reading a grocery list. My father stood in the corner, staring at the wall. My mother wouldn't look at me. And you, her voice breaking, you were gone. Not just from the room, from me. You looked at me like I was a ghost. So I became one. Liam's knees hit the earth, his hands scrabbling in the dirt as if digging for the child they'd lost. I didn't know, I swear to God. Evie, I didn't know, his tears carving tracks through the grime on his face. Evelyn's voice a guttural whisper. You think that helps, that your ignorance absolves you? I bled alone. I grieved alone. And when I left, it wasn't just the fire I was running from. It was you. The way you looked at me like I was glass. Like I'd shatter if you touched me. His roar startled an owl from the branches above. I was terrified. You were in a coma for 3 days. The doctors said you might not. His fist pounding the ground. I was a kid who'd just lost everything. You, the baby, my fucking mind, and you left. The accusation hung between them, barbed and bleeding, until Evelyn's whisper cut through. You didn't follow. The truth of it is a guillotine. They sat in the wreckage of their youth, the oak's roots cradling them like the grave they never dug. Clara's ghost shimmering in the periphery, her hand pressed to her own phantom womb in solidarity, the wind carrying the scent of Evelyn's sister's lilacs from the ruins, a cruel reminder that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. Dawn found them at the river's edge, Clara's ghost flickering in the mist, her form more substantial now. As if their suffering had fed her resolve, Liam's voice raw. From hours of silence, I don't want a life that isn't you, the admission torn from some primal depth, his hands shaking as he cupped Evelyn's face. I'd built skyscrapers to outrun you. To prove I didn't need this town, or the boy I was, but every window I designed had your reflection in it. Every fucking one. Evelyn's resolve crumbled. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of losing us again. Her fingers twisting in his shirt, the fabric straining like the last thread of resistance, the river's current swirling around their ankles as Clara's ghost stepped closer, her translucent hand brushing theirs, the touch colder than the water, colder than the years apart, but sparking something electric. Liam's lips finding Evelyn's in a collision of decades, the kiss a supernova desperate, bruising, a reclaiming of stolen breath, their bodies swaying as the river tried to claim them, Clara's laughter ringing like church bells, her form dissolving into sunlight as the town stirred behind them, the oak tree's branches trembling as if applauding. Margot's voice carried on the wind from her porch swing. "Took you idiots long enough," her flask glinting in the dawn light. The moment ruptured by the blare of a police siren, the sheriff's cruiser skidding to a halt. "We got a problem at the Historical Society." Someone torched the archives. The locket now rests in a museum, its placard crediting anonymous donors, the glass case reflecting the faces of schoolchildren pressing noses to the exhibit, their giggles bouncing off the walls as they dare each other to touch the haunted relic, while Liam and Evelyn's wedding photo hangs in Margot's inn. The caption, "Second Chances," sponsored by a ghost with impeccable timing. Their laughter echoing through Willowbrook's streets during monthly visits, the town's secrets laid bare in a best-selling memoir Evelyn never intended to write, its pages a bomb and a bomb, her prose dissecting the rot with surgical precision. Liam's architectural firm now specializing in rebuilding towns with better bones, his blueprints incorporating the oak tree's silhouette into every design, a silent homage to the roots that refused to let go. Margot's death at 93 marked by a raucous wake where the townsfolk swore they saw Clara's ghost dancing on the bar, her laughter mingling with the clink of gin glasses, the inn bequeathed to a queer teen Margot had mentored, their first act painting the shutter's rainbow to scare the Baptists, and on the oak tree, new initials appear weekly: J+M, A+R, T+, scratched by hands trembling with the audacity of hope, the branches heavy with lockets and letters and the occasional condom wrapper, Clara's silhouette seen on foggy mornings. Her hand resting approvingly on the trunk, her whisper in the leaves, "Begin." And so the legend grows, a tale of love resurrected by time's stubborn hands, of secrets unearthed and scars kissed into wisdom, a reminder that sometimes the universe insists on rewriting endings, and that even ghosts, it seems, believe in happily ever after. The story rippling beyond Willowbrook's borders, a podcast episode going viral with theories about Clara's true identity, TikTok trends where couples bury lockets under oaks, and a Netflix deal Margot's ghost reportedly negotiated via Ouija board, the royalties funneled into the town's first LGBTQ+ center. Liam and Evelyn's daughter's fierce-eyed girl with her mother's scar and her father's stubborn chin discovering her own locket under the oak at 15, the engraving reading to E. Jr., "Break the wheel." Mom and Dad, her eye roll hiding a smile as she texts her girlfriend, parental haunting.